in love with. Yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, they keep breaking into my meetings, and I'm like, wait, no, I don't want you in this one.
yeah, it's so funny. I literally don't even have the subscription anymore, and it still joins my meetings.
Same with me. I'm using some other one, Meeting Geek or something. I forgot.
Yeah.
I canceled it because it wasn't really doing a great job.
Mm,
It was like 12 pages. I was like, I don't need
mm.
12 pages.
Gee.
And I canceled it, unhooked it, and it still shows up in my meetings.
Yeah, it's so funny. That's like the real downfall of AI, where like everyone has like their fears. It's like I'm not even asking the AI to help me, and it still
I
keeps
know, and it's trying to
joining.
help me.
At this point, I've removed it 3 times, so we'll see if we can go the meeting without it joining, but we'll see what happens. Um, so episode 17, everyone. Welcome to the Conquer the Mind podcast. Yeah, we're really cranking them through. We got an industry veteran with us today, Rob Flanagan, Chief Operating Officer of Hounds Town, USA. He's really rocking the sweater there right now. So I love
You
it.
gotta fly the colors, man.
Yes, sir. Always be branding. So basically, I'm going to do a brief background of Rob's background. Rob, feel free to interrupt, correct me if I mess up anywhere. I know I'm going to miss out on a lot of things along the way because you've done so much and accomplished a lot. But I want to just help everyone kind of get a brief introduction of who we're speaking to today. So basically, Rob started off as the first employee back in 2003 at Doc Popcorn.
That's
Maybe
right.
rings a bell to some people, was later purchased by Dippin Dots, which I'm sure a lot of people know as well. But he started with them as their very first employee when they were literally just a business deciding to, do this new thing called franchising, which is really just a growth strategy that we'll learn about. And Rob, like I said, started out as a first employee there, became the vice president of operations for an international franchising concept that grew from one location to literally triple digit locations, over 115 locations, and started with double digit negative growth to up to positive 25%, just through strategic implementation. JD Strategic, we're here to be strategic, helping them with new products, real estate selection. And really, he learned franchising from the ground up and was able to implement so many successful strategies and really learned what it takes to take an emerging brand into really a thriving, successful brand. So, in a nutshell, what he kind of does is he partners with the founders of these franchises who are really the visionaries. And then he takes them from around 10, 12 units to these triple digit thriving franchises. And like I said, he did it with Dot Popcorn. He later did it with Wag N Wash. And now he's been with Hounds Town for a couple of years, and he's really done the same thing. And Hounds Town is really an award-winning brand at this point, that a lot of people are aware about. So, Rob, how did I do there? What did we miss?
You did really well. I had forgotten some of that, and that sounds awesome. And it all went straight to my head. No, joking aside, though, I mean, as amazing as all that sounds, I think it is really important to be specific that yes, I was part of all those things, learned a tremendous amount.
Hmm,
It's a team effort,
hmm,
100% of the time.
hmm,
And I was just blessed and was in the right place at the right time. Worked hard for sure, took advantage of the opportunities. But there was an amazing team always around
hmm.
me
Yeah.
as for all those success stories.
Hmm,
And it's kind of it's been kind of making its way through the social media webs, but talking about being a self-made person, and
hmm,
I I agree with what people are saying now is that I'm not, because there
hmm,
have been so many mentors, so many people who helped me over the past 20 plus
hmm,
years. And if I don't give a shout out to those people, I'm
hmm.
not living our values.
Yeah, no, that's really, really powerful. And I think that's a real common trait of very successful people. They have these mentors, they're willing to give the credit. I think a lot of people, it's kind of this idea of whether you want to be in business by yourself or franchising, just this idea of alignment and franchising, having all these mentors by your side. So I think that's something we'll definitely dive in today. And, something so powerful with the idea of franchising. But I understand you kind of the joke in franchising is really everyone falls into franchising, and you quite frankly literally did fall into
Literally fell
franchising,
into
like,
it. Yes, you really
looking
did your
for,
homework. This is impressive. Yeah,
yeah, no, trust me. I
it's
know
my
Rob was in college looking for some beer money, and he literally, he tripped and fell into franchising.
yeah, wow, you really did your, it's my favorite story. Not just because of the franchising aspect, but from a life
Yeah.
perspective. And so the way the shortest version I can make it is I was putting myself through grad school and I was studying to be a therapist. I was getting my
Mm.
master's degree in psychology and I needed beer money and I had to pick a teacher and it was Diane Israel or Dewey Freeman. And I remember making this decision where it was, well, normally I don't know these teachers. Normally you do it alphabetical by last name. I'm throwing caution to the wind, everybody. I'm going to do it alphabetical by first name.
Mm.
Pick Diane over Dewey, DI over before DU. Only reason I picked
Yeah.
her. Her and I hit it off. She was a great teacher. And
Mm.
I went to her one day and I just said, hey, I'm looking for a part-time job. Do you know anybody? And she's
Mm.
like, well, my brother, Rob Israel, the founder of Dot Popcorn, him and his wife, they were dating at the time.
Mm.
He's like, he's about to open up this business and I'll put you guys in touch. I was like, okay, I wasn't attached to what the job was. I just needed something. And I met Rob and it was one of the first hires there. It was like minimum wage, maybe a
Yeah.
dollar above minimum wage. And it's really these how your life changes on a dime. It really
Mm.
does because I knew randomly picked Diane. I meet Rob, and Rob has been a mentor of mine now going on 20 plus years. I just met with Rob and Renee a couple weeks ago because it was the 20-year anniversary of Dot Popcorn first opening. And it was amazing because it was Robin, Renee, and I were just kind of
Mm.
reminiscing about like what it was like that first crazy holiday season. We did, we're figuring everything out.
Yeah.
And then Rob really took me under his wing.
Mm.
There were plenty of times where I probably gave him a few gray hairs. So I was a young guy. I was new to business, knew nothing
Yeah.
about business. And we grew Dot Popcorn throughout Colorado. We had close to 20 points of presence. We were in Whole Foods,
Mm.
where the Nuggets played, where the Broncos played. And then around 2008, got into franchising.
Mm.
And that's where it really clicked for me was like the synergy between kind of the psychology of business and
Mm.
franchising was really prevalent. And I loved that part.
Yeah.
And we grew through franchising, and then ultimately ownership decided to sell to Dippin Dots, and then I ran
Mm.
Dot Popcorn through underneath the Dippin Dots umbrella. Did a
Mm.
bunch of consulting at that time, which is its own separate podcast. Moved on to Wag N Wash, and then now here at Hounds Town.
No, that I think my thing froze a little bit, but yeah, that's really fascinating. I love how just the shout out to the mentors and the idea that I always kind of emphasize is our life is usually defined by just a few events and it plays just such a significant role. And I
Yeah,
think that's just such a prime example and really powerful. Just this idea that everyone falls into franchising and it just applies like millions and millions of jobs, yet not a lot of people know about the opportunity. And it's so funny that once someone does fall in, it's not like other industries where, you do it for a couple of years, you try it out, then you try another industry. Literally people, when you talk to them in franchising, they've been there for over 20 years, 30 years, and they have no expectation of leaving. Like, it's just so interesting to me. But one of the things that I think is really interesting, and just the idea of the podcast, Conquer the Mind, and this idea of mentorship. And, it's clearly played a very strong role in your life as well. So I'd kind of be very interested, for a lot of people, maybe struggling, maybe in their 20s, trying to figure out what their purpose is, what their why is, really one of the hardest things in life. I think it's interesting that you were a psychology major and then you found like a business mentor. I think it's easy if someone's a business major, you say, find someone successful at business, you can find a mentor that way. But, how do you find a mentor, if you really don't know what industry you want to be in, what advice would you give to someone in those kind of early stages?
Yeah, love your question. And so, like when I tell that story,
Mm,
sounds great, right?
yeah,
Like when you're looking in the rear view mirror, everything looks rosy.
yeah.
But I also share the story that there was a time there from when I graduated to when Dot Popcorn decided a franchise. So from about 2006 to about 2008,
Mm,
I was very lost.
mm,
I was in my later 20s. I had just put myself through grad school, but I no longer wanted to be a therapist. I
mm.
did not actually enjoy it. Maybe, you don't always know, right? I
Right.
seemed drawn to it, but then after I graduated, I didn't want to do it. My joke was I didn't like sitting across from people listening to their problems all day. So I
Yeah,
got into franchising where I listened to people's problems all day.
yeah, exactly.
But in that 2-year period, it was
Mm,
at the level of an existential, I don't want to say crisis, but I was very lost.
mhm.
Everybody around me now in their late 20s, early 30s are moving up in life.
Mhm.
And I remember like going on dates. I was single at the time. And
Mm.
I literally would have some of these dates be like, you're running a popcorn store, like in a
Yeah,
mall? Like where are you going? I don't want to
right.
date you because you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And yes, there was a part of me that certainly saw some potential with Dot Popcorn, but at that time it was growing in like little tiny steps, which is what you see
Mm.
in business. It kind of Their overnight successes over
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah.
And but what I really stayed true to was that no matter what I was doing, and this came from my parents, which I was also just very blessed to have like really good role models there, was that no matter what you're doing, learn skills. Even if what this thing you're doing is not ultimately your forever path, even if you're studying psychology, but you're ending up not being a therapist, you're learning skills. And skills transcend every industry. Doesn't matter if you're a therapist or if you're going to be in IT or you're going to be doing this or you get out of business and you go some other direction. Skill sets really propel you forward. And so everything I was kind of doing, even if I didn't exactly know I was doing it at the time, was developing these skill sets that have served me. And then when you're kind of getting into a certain skill set that you're looking to teach yourself, I like to say that with a library card, back when libraries were more around, and a work ethic, any person in America can create anything they want to create. And so you find the books, and then you go find either the mentors or the people within that skill set that you're looking to develop, whether that could be in leadership, it could be something like Microsoft Excel.
Mm.
Very early on, I knew nothing about Microsoft Excel. Became very clear that if you wanted, especially to be in operations, you needed to be an Excel guy.
Yeah.
So I went and found people who could teach me and help me with a basic skill like Microsoft Excel, or even be like, oh, I want to kind of move into more leading companies. I need to learn how to be a leader. So how do I go find people who can help mentor me in that capacity? Sometimes that's a book,
Mm.
sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's an individual that you're working with. But I always kind of organized it around a skill set that I was specifically looking to develop.
Mhm. Yeah, you just dropped so many fascinating points. And I think it's just a lot of people, especially, graduating from college, really, that's a time where, you graduate with maybe a business degree, you feel like that's your direction, but you may have no business experience or anything like that. And then, life hits you and then you figure out you want to do something else. And, a lot of times when people are lost, it's very easy, like you said, look at someone on their 100th step, someone that is, a president, a CEO. It's easy to look at someone and say, oh, they had their success. But it really, when those people are lost in those 18s, there's 20s, all those people started off in that same place as well. everyone starts off on their step one, then eventually they make their path. But like you said, it sounds like you took just direct action, making yourself accessible, very open to taking ideas from other people, and this idea of mentorship and trying to read and educate yourself. So I think that those are all really, really great lessons, and especially nowadays with social media, with YouTube, with the internet, the resources are so abundant. It's really just a matter of kind of taking action. And, like you said, you went to school with a psychology degree. You just started learning all these different skills that, although you didn't end up being a psychologist, as we kind of know with franchising, you're literally dealing with, people's lives, people's careers. So it really is a game of psychology and better understanding people and their goals and needs. So I think that's just a really great lesson for anyone struggling. You don't have to figure it all out at once. You just need to start doing small things each day. And, I think this idea of stacking a win, I know you mentioned in another podcast, you start your day just with like a 15-minute conversation with your daughter. It doesn't have to be, huge, crazy thing, but just some small thing along the way, helps with grounding, gives you perspective. So I think those are all really great lessons, Robin, something I just wanted to point out. So as you were kind of at Dot Popcorn, I think it's really interesting how you started literally from the ground up and literally became a COO who literally deals with the ins and outs of the business. And I think it's kind of relates a lot to incoming candidates who think about this idea of franchising. And a lot of people, especially nowadays, want to be an absentee owner. But it seems like really the most successful franchise owners are people that they don't have to be owner operator for life. That's not really the goal of any franchise system, but starting owner operator for maybe 6 months up to 24 months, building up that asset so that you can let the operations grow. So what was kind of the strengths of you learning Dot Popcorn from the ground up to being able to kind of apply that to, Wag N Wash, Hounds Town, and, being able to have all this expertise?
Yeah, so you nailed two really important topics there. So one is in franchising,
Mhm.
the owner operator versus semi-active versus absentee. So I'm going to put that in the parking lot because that's a great topic right there.
Yeah.
For me, learning franchising from the ground up has been really just, again, a blessing,
Mhm.
because now that I'm in the CEO, presidency, whatever, we don't really use titles at Hounds Town, but kind of running the company.
Yeah.
What I really reference is like, because I came up as a franchise business consultant. And I remember being out in the field, I'm opening stores, and my phone's ringing from other franchisees that have some kind of problem. And it was a lot.
Mhm.
And so what I really try to do is, it's just kind of this generic phrase I use, but things that pissed me off when I was younger, now I'm in a place where I can try to do things a little bit differently. So one of those things as an FBC is doing everything I can within the financial constraints of an emerging brand, is
Mhm.
to make sure we're giving the resources to our team to go support our franchisees appropriately, so that the franchisees can then grow, which ultimately grows the whole brand.
Mhm.
And so being on the road, understanding what it's like to have to manage all these different things when you're on the road, to even getting into where I'm now and being like, oh, that's why people were saying I had to do it that way. That makes
Mhm.
sense. But then taking that information and communicating the why to our team so they understand the context behind what we're doing.
Mhm.
And I think it's very helpful for anybody within franchising or any kind of business to kind of understand that.
Mhm.
Now with Dot Popcorn, because I came up from the bottom and ran the stores, I really understood the epic details of running the unit level business.
Mhm.
Now that I've moved into kind of a different stage of my life, I will be the first one to tell you, I do not know everything about the ins and outs of running a Wag N Wash or a Hounds Town or
Mhm.
any of those type of brands, or if I was consulting. That takes years to fully learn. Mhm.
Hmm.
So my role now is different. It's more about guiding and creating this is where the brand is going. Here's how we're going to get there, keeping the team aligned, keeping our franchisees aligned on that vision and how we're going to get there.
Hmm.
And then really delegating and relying on the other subject matter experts who are this is how the store runs.
Hmm.
And the way I kind of describe that is you often will hear this phrase where it says, well, the CEO's job is to really be with the customer. And I actually say that's not true. I'm removed from the end customer at the end of the day. The end customer at the Hounds Town and even my end customer, my franchisee.
Hmm.
My job is to take care of the team that is taking care of the customer. And so when you kind of get into this emerging brand space and you start kind of getting that type of growth, leadership, founders, it's a completely different way of thinking because it's no longer how do I go do this? It's much more about who needs to go do this and how do I set the context for that individual to go be amazing and successful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and you'll know better than me, but I think that's might be the difference a little bit between more of an emerging brand versus a more well-established brand. Versus an emerging brand, you might have the president, the CEO, the founder that's literally going out there and helping you open the stores, whereas something more well-established, they have the resources in place where it's not like you need the president like on direct dial every single day because they have the systems, the resources in place, and they have, dozens, if not hundreds of other franchise owners in the system that you can speak to and will literally be able to help you out with all those same challenges. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of a little bit of a differentiator kind of going off your point.
Big, a huge part. And that's a lot of what I do is when I partner with the founders and it's 10 or 15, and it's really about putting in the infrastructure to scale a brand.
Hmm.
And a phrase that people hear a lot, how do you 10x this brand?
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to 10x it if the founder is doing real estate and construction and opening the stores and taking all the phone calls. Same for me. Same for a lot of things. You have to kind of convert. Convert's not the right word. It's grow.
Hmm.
Grow the brand from where one person is doing everything to more of a systemized approach to growth.
Hmm.
And then you have to really now tie in the psychology because you have some franchisees that have come in, but they came in when the founder was doing everything. They have like a really emotional connection with the founder.
Hmm.
And now the brand is shifting to a completely different way of support and doing things. And you can't just throw that change into the system. You have to be very mindful about it. It's very hard to do, but you need to kind of guide the system away from one person, the founder, kind of doing everything to now growing into
Hmm.
a larger organization that's more systemized. My joke is, hey guys, you're going to hear me say there's a form for that.
Yeah.
When it's smaller, you don't have
Yeah.
forms. Hey, I need this. What about that? Oh, here you go. Just email me. There you go. That's great. It works. There's no problem with it. But when you get to 55 locations, 100 locations, 200 locations, you have to systemize all these things to have the brand grow to
Hmm.
the biggest places that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, those are really great points. And I want to talk about the systematic growth after one other point, because I know when you're on another podcast, you're kind of talking, you made a really great point about how emerging brands, you start off as an emerging brand, you go to, these big conventions and you listen to, like the McDonald's, the Subways, people saying, you need this technology, you need this and that. And you made a great point that yes, you do need it, but do you need it right now? And being strategic with your growth, because it's so hard to reach that 100 unit level. There's so many different variables. So that's something I want to get into in 1 second. There's something else that you brought up that I think is really interesting. Just this idea, how you said kind of now as a COO, your job is not to know literally like the ins and you do know the ins and outs, but you don't know like the specifics. And I think that's a really great point where, as a franchisor, your customer or client is almost like the franchise owners, whereas the
Correct.
franchise owners, they're focused in on actual customers or clients that their products are servicing. But when you make that initial, as a candidate, you make that investment into a franchise system, you're buying into the support, the resources, what, as a franchisor, what percent are you focused in on, franchisee satisfaction and growing franchises versus, the products, the innovation, the services, and kind of helping franchise owners with what they're actually offering, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So the way I talk about that, and both of these ways are accurate in a way, but you can either look at it as here, or you can kind of look at it like this. I personally look at it like this, and here at the top, what it is the brand.
Mm.
And being the steward of the Hounds Town brand. So our mission is that every dog in America has access to Hounds Town. That's our mission. In 10 years, we want every dog in America to have access to Hounds Town. Then there's all these strategies that kind of go into how do we go accomplish that, and that's a deeper podcast.
Yeah.
But that's all about the brand, and within that brand umbrella is where you're exploring how does the brand shift, what is our messaging to our end consumer, the person bringing their dog into the facility, what are maybe different revenue streams. These are tricky points because we've all seen brands that kind of went too far away from what their core niche is. But you've also seen some brands stay too loyal to their core niche and not expand when the marketplace was saying they needed to.
Yeah.
So, but by being stewards of the brand, and that cascades down to the unit level with the franchisee, if it's not driving revenue and profit, well, what are we doing? And so then it's got to come down into the unit level. You have to communicate it. I mean, people say 8 times, I say 20 times. You have to consistently communicate, especially within a franchise concept. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the benefit for you. Some franchisees come in with a lot of heart. We see that in a dog-based business. There's a lot of heart, but I make the joke, nobody's getting into this to run a nonprofit. So everything we're doing is about raising sales, raising profit, and expanding our mission that every dog in America has access to a house. Does that answer your question?
No, 100%. I think it's just really interesting how you're trying to balance both the growth of franchise owners, the continual scalability of current franchise owners, and then those franchise owners, the products and services that they're offering. So it's just this whole element that franchising, the support, the alignment that you have. I just think it's so unique. Whereas in any industry or any career, really, you don't really just get this opportunity to have mentors that, their success is based on your success. So I think it's really powerful. And going back to the previous point where you kind of mentioned the systematic growth, and one of your roles over the years has been helping emerging brands become well-established brands. And one of the numbers I think you alluded to is I think it's 80% of emerging brands don't reach that 100 unit
That's
mark.
the number that's kind of out there.
Yeah.
And I probably need to double check to see where it is, but definitively, whatever that number is, many brands that kind of first get into franchising don't get to 100 units. And so a lot of what I do is kind of I identified what are essentially these 10 hurdles that emerging brands have to go through to get to 100 units. And it's all about scaling that brand from this founder-led, typically regionally based business to something that is kind of growing outside that core region. Maybe it's across the country.
Yeah.
But all those kind of strategies, and how do you kind of plan for those things as best you can? You're not going to get everything, but kind of guide through there. that ties to that technology question that you had asked, because one of the main reasons that a lot of emerging brands don't get to 100 is how they manage their capital.
Mhm.
So it takes, even though you're kind of growing through franchising, it costs ownership typically over $1 million, if not more, to really kind of get this brand to that next level.
Yeah.
So your capital is really, really critical, like it is in any business.
Mhm.
But I've seen so many brands kind of go to a conference, they go to this, that they're not really sure of their direction, what strategy they need. They see this technology, it costs X, and they go, oh, I'm going to go invest in that. You will need that technology, but hey, you're at 15 units. You can manage this on an Excel spreadsheet right now.
Mhm.
You don't maybe need a big robust Salesforce CRM for your 15 franchisees today. You're going to maybe need it in 2 years. Let's plan for it then. But let's just be really, really disciplined on where we allocate our cash. And generally, what I recommend, and again, every brand's a little bit different, to kind of, there's nuances, but as much as possible, allocate your cash to hiring the best franchise people that you can, that will come into your organization and help build those systems to get you over 100 units.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice. I think one of the biggest things I hear from emerging brand founders that have kind of made that mistake is mistaking the initial franchise fee with the first 5 franchise owners and being more on a sell basis rather than an awarding basis when they first start off. And
Yes.
I think that's one of the big dilemmas with reaching that 100 units, because to reach 100 units, you have to have very strong validation with current franchise owners in the current system. It's not just like you sold 100 units one year and you got your check and you left. You literally have these franchise owners that are in the system buying more units. So I think that's just a really strong point. And you kind of brought up the financials, and that one of the, as a potential candidate, you're evaluating emerging brands, and there can be a lot of emerging brands today. How do you kind of best evaluate the financials? You mentioned, needing $1 million for, a business to start franchising. Is that a question you can ask them, or do you think they need like a parent company, for example? Or, because I hear a lot of times a new business idea, they tell me, oh, I heard about they're starting the franchise. I got like a LinkedIn ad for it. And it's
Yeah.
like, but they have no franchising experience throughout the CEO, the COO, the CMO. And, it triggers a lot of red flags for me. But for them, they see this really cool idea and they're like, whoa, I can grow this idea, low investment. So I think that's just really interesting. Is there a way to evaluate the financial strength of an emerging brand where you may not be able to necessarily look at an FDD?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have an FDD, and now, so in the FDD, the franchisor has to put in their audited financials.
Hmm.
So if you have the FDD and the audit, and I'm actually shocked by this, large brands, small brands, how many franchisees don't look at the audited financials? But part of what I used to do, and I don't have the time for it as much, but I used to work with. I wasn't a broker in any capacity. Again, it was something I kind of fell into. But I would work with people who are looking at franchising just to educate them about what franchising is and how to evaluate different brands. What are the
Hmm.
skills in a way? And one of the things I would always strongly encourage is within the FDD, take a look at the audited financials and ask whoever you are speaking to within that brand about what is being told in those audited financials. Now, an important caveat in this is that the accounting rules changed a couple of years ago. So a franchise fee is amortized over 10 years.
Hmm.
So you may look at an emerging brand and you're going to look at their P&L statement and it may look weak because they can't recognize the full revenue of selling a franchise agreement.
Right.
But look at their balance sheet and take a look at how much cash they have and how they're managing their cash. And if you see anything that raises a question, not necessarily a red flag, ask. and
Mm,
make sure you're getting that information as a prospect, because you want to make sure in a younger brand that's growing, and I mean that in between 0 to 100 units, if
mm,
not slightly beyond that,
yeah.
you want to ensure that that franchisor is set up for success for the future, that it's not a house of cards.
Mm,
Now, if it's something where they don't have an FDD, now you're speaking here to a very unique individual, very entrepreneurial. Um, it's almost outside of franchising in a way. But in that situation, man, if I'm you, I am making sure that I am getting really concrete financial statements before I
mm,
jump into anything that doesn't have an FDD,
yeah.
because you're putting a lot of faith and a lot of trust in something that hasn't maybe been brought to market fully and
Mm,
is not really fully vetted as a viable business for the future.
mm. Yeah, I think that those are really great points. And one of the things you mentioned is this idea of asking questions. I think a lot of candidates go into the discovery process with this idea of looking for reasons to say no, but there's never going to be a perfect opportunity. You know, a business owner is
Never.
just as great as the risk as being in a 9 to 5 position. So it's literally just weighing the pros and cons and figuring out what your goals are in 3 to 5 years. And, you know, does your current position get you there? Does franchising, does business ownership, does something else get you there? So I think that's really good. Just asking questions and not looking at something and then, you know, immediately backing away, because the process is there for a reason, where you can validate with other franchise owners and get all those tough questions answered. But I think what's really powerful with Houndstown, and kind of diving into the opportunity a little bit, is just the idea of, you know, they had the president, they had the visionary, they had a really strong business model, and then they brought someone like yourself in that, you know, has over a decade of experience helping emerging brands integrate that vision into a franchise business model. Can you kind of speak on the power of, you know, just bringing in someone like yourself? And I think when I speak to candidates, you know, it's always evaluating the franchisor just as much and understanding, you know, what experience do they have, because they're your support system. So once you make that initial investment, you know, are they just on to the next candidate, or do they have that experience and they know how to build a successful system?
Yeah. So bear with me. I'll try to keep this all tight. I can pontificate a little bit.
No worries. Feel free to go
So,
off the
but
curve.
hopefully I'll keep it tight. So when a prospect's coming in, and
Mm,
again, I'm talking about the emerging brand space, and let's just say it's the founders are kind of, it's early stage. The founders are still kind of doing a lot. What I tell prospect is like, ask the founders what their 3 to 5 year plan is. When are they looking to bring in people? What are systems they're looking to implement? Because what I find, and again, these are generalities, these aren't to every situation, that at that early stage, people are buying into the brand because they trust the founder.
mhm,
Oh, this isn't some private equity backed concept. Here's a person who built this. I like them. There's something about them that resonates with me, and I trust this individual. And that is powerful and should not be dismissed. But it shouldn't be the only reason to go with a brand that is at that early stage. You
mhm,
should really be doing a lot of your due diligence to understand how that ownership group, that founder group, has a plan to grow this brand and scale the brand. And that's just because you're making your own investment. You're putting your life savings typically on the line. You need to kind of really not just, I trust them.
yeah.
Do that due diligence.
Mm,
So when I come in and, on paper, it sounds, oh, this is easy. It has its challenges, for sure. Challenges for me, challenges for the founders. We're really coming in as a team to
mm,
grow this brand. And we have to work within two different individuals on what are these things and how does that support the vision of the brand, or how does it conflict with the vision of the brand. And you have to really kind of work through those things. What's typically happening when I come in is that growth has already started to catch on. My joke is I usually get hired a year to 18 months I wish I could have been hired a year or 18 months sooner. Because that's what's, and it makes sense, right? The founders have been
Yeah.
kind of doing this, cash is tight, something's kind of caught on, they're starting to grow. They're
Mm,
like, oh, I need somebody to come in and help. But now you're kind of building the plane while you're learning to build the plane.
mm,
And so that can be stressful at times. But when you find somebody like me with 20 years of experience, and again, there's other me's out there. I'm not, a unicorn in any capacity. There's brilliant people in the franchise space that do this. But they kind of come in and they say, this is the way. Here's how we have to emotionally and psychologically communicate with your franchisees. Here are
mm,
the strategies around your franchise development and your growth and how we want to structure that. Here's our operational strategies. Here are our marketing strategies. And here are how we want to really drive unit economics at the end of the day. I
mm,
always say that your unit economics is what drives your franchise sales. If your
mm,
franchisees aren't making money, or the money they're making is not meeting their expectation of what they thought they were going to be making, things can get very emotional. And
mm.
now, if you're trying to navigate those emotions, it's hard to get to the tactics
Yeah.
because emotions are in play. So,
Mm,
what I speak to our team a lot about is there's a difference between managing expectations and a broken promise.
mm,
If the franchisee feels like I broke a promise to them, even if I didn't literally, but they feel like I did or my company did, that's hard to navigate. Hey, we're going to really do everything we can to manage expectations. Now, we may have mismanaged them. That happens in any relationship, but you can work with a mismanaged expectation.
mm.
Working with a broken promise is very hard. Does
Right.
that answer that question?
No, I think that's really interesting. And I know you're very big on like managing expectations. And I had Ron Bender on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned, if he has a franchise owner that tells him like, oh, they were surprised by this, he always says like he didn't do his job. And I think that's just really
Great.
powerful. I like also how you gave shout outs to other people and said, you're not like a unicorn or anything. And I think it's just
No.
really interesting in franchising the alignment, how even like competitors, like say Hounds Town, another dog competitor, they're all at the same conferences, going over different industry like secrets, systems, resources. So there's just so much alignment. Even people that you think are competing, they tend to work together in all these different ways. But with managing expectations, right before I want to dive into Houndstown and the history a little bit, because there is a very powerful history with the founder. I think it's interesting for candidates as they go through the process. You talk about managing expectations. And I think it's really interesting this idea of, you have these expectations, then you become a franchise owner and, maybe things are a little bit different. So, how does a candidate going through the process kind of evaluate? Is this franchise, selling me? Are they looking for my best interest? How do they know like if their expectations are going to be met in some extent?
Yeah, it's the nuance of franchising because of
Mm,
the regulation from the Federal Trade Commission, right?
mm,
And I say, it's a common analogy that the franchisor franchisee relationship is very similar to a marriage. But instead of being able to date really, really closely for a year, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is, it's a very different type of dating process. Where we're trying to get to know the franchisee. The franchisor wants to make sure that this person can represent the brand and help us grow the brand. The
mm,
franchisee is making sure, hey, if I put my money into this, I'm going to get a return on investment and that this truly aligns. All I can share is what we do.
mm,
It works for us, may not work for other brands. But at our approval day, I'm the one that kind of goes through this. I literally kind of go in there and give very, very clear examples of the realities of running your own business. I
mm,
go into what is my responsibility as a franchisor and what's their responsibility as the franchisee. The analogy I use is it's like a car. So my job as a franchisor is to think about what upgrades need to happen to the car in the next couple of years. So, like your Ford Escort looks one way today, but 5 years it's going to look different, have a different
Yeah.
body, different technology in it. It's going to be doing different things. The franchisee's responsibility is to drive that car. We
Mm.
get very granular on it. And I use a story of when I met my wife. We both said we liked clean dishes. Okay. Then we moved in together, and it became very apparent that my definition of a clean dish was very different from hers. She likes to let the dishwasher do all the work.
Yeah.
I clean it off in the sink, and then I put it in the dishwasher. It wasn't a lover's quarrel or anything like that, but it was like this light bulb moment to me as I was coming up in franchise. I was like, oh, I'm going to franchisees and saying the point of sale can be challenging.
Mm.
They're like, oh, yeah, of course. But we didn't talk about how it can be challenging. Here's what can happen. And it's your responsibility to do A, B, and C. And here's my responsibility. So we go really granular into that reality.
Mm.
I then go into the FDD very, very specifically. I call out footnotes. I call out, hey, here's what this is saying in item 6 or in item 7. I go into our item 19. We put in P&L statements for all of our locations. We have one location does phenomenal. It makes a ton of money. But I go to the franchisees at approval day and say, look, this rent that this franchisee has, you're you you're I'll go out on a limb and say you're not going to get that rent.
Mm.
It's not likely. It's very low rent, which is driving more of that profitability. So
Mm.
here are these averages. And we go into them on how they need to evaluate the business model using our data from the item 19. We talk about expectations on break even and what break even means and what it means to be cash flow positive.
Mm.
We go into details about the SBA right now. Hey, if you're using the SBA, cash is very expensive today. It's going to push back your cash flow positivity date. You got to make sure you're comfortable with that and still have enough capital to do any of these things. I tell franchisees, when you look at our item 7, you take our high end and you use the high end number.
Mm.
That's not my goal. That's not your goal,
Right.
but it could happen. And as I've heard franchise, I pick on Des Moines, Iowa for some reason, but it's like I live in Des Moines, Iowa, so it's going to be cheaper to do it here in Des Moines. I was like, well, it may, but not necessarily. There's a
Mm.
lot of other factors that go into play. So when you're making this big financial decision, run kind of a more conservative analysis off the high, because I don't want there to be a broken promise. I
Mm.
just want it to be kept within the expectations.
Mm.
The other thing I talk about, and again, I'm throwing a ton of stuff at you,
I
but I
love
think
it.
this is really, really important because it's not just about Hounds Town. It's about protecting franchising as an industry.
Mm.
When other people, if they're not any ill content, but they're just don't know what they don't know, it gives franchising as a whole a bad name. So that's why I'm getting passionate
Mm.
about this. I go
100%.
and talk to franchisees and like I'll hear this often at approval day. Well, I'm going to work hard, so I'm going to get my store open sooner. They have in their mind that the stores that are kind of maybe opening later weren't working hard.
Mm.
Again, they don't know what they don't know. I was
Right.
like, man, I got to be really clear. The hard work will maximize the potential of whatever you're doing, but there are macro things that are your hard work can only do so much. There's zoning,
Mm.
there's what is available in your market, permitting. There are things out of your control. So don't franchisee think that your hard work, yet you're going to work really hard,
Yeah.
but don't get too Pollyanna and just be like, well, I'm going to work harder and I'm going to be the number one store.
Mm.
You have to actually kind of work within what is given to you within your market, the competition around you, your trade area. Your hard work will maximize and ultimately lead to success. But the timing of that success is not directly correlated to hard work all the time.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. As I'm kind of putting myself in like a candidate's shoes, I'm just thinking about the hundreds of questions like they're potentially thinking about, and they need to understand, it really is a 3 to 6 month real discovery education process. So no decision ever needs to be made today. Like I think the point you're really emphasizing is you don't need to make all these assumptions. They have the process in place for a reason. And I think a really good point to kind of look at while you are speaking to franchisors is, are they telling you this information, or do you feel like you're being sold this information? And it's very clear that, you're walking them through all the information. I think it's really good idea to play things on the conservative end as well, looking at the high end numbers, not just looking at, the most you could potentially make and looking at all that, really analyzing, the top 25%, the middle 25%, the bottom 25%. And then, like you said, looking at the reasons why that actually happened, not just looking at the numbers. But I think one of the points you actually make really well is one franchisee is just one franchisee, and that's just one story. So you have to analyze because every story is totally different. And I think a really interesting point in franchising is whenever you ask someone about their ideal candidate, there is no ideal candidate because they come from all aspects of life. Really, the only theme of successful franchise owners is they want to be successful, really, and they've chosen the right system. So I think that's really powerful. And as our
Yeah,
time,
I'm there just to make a quick point. What I
yeah,
again, this is one man's opinion, right? This is something I talk to founders a lot about because you go to these conferences and it's like this is the way.
right.
Like there are a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
It's what fits that founder, what fits that brand, right? But one thing that I kind of will position in the emerging brand space is look in the very beginning. Yeah, man, you want to be so clear on who you're bringing in. We use Zorkel. I'm a big fan of Zorkel. Shout out to Zorkel. If Zorkel hears this, shout out to you. I think they do a phenomenal job of helping brands kind of identify the personalities of the people that are coming in.
Mhm.
Then as the brand kind of grows, though, you're the type of franchisee that can come into your program does expand because
Mhm.
your systems are creating those guardrails to help more individuals be able to be successful within your brand. But in the very beginning, you don't have those guardrails.
Mhm.
So you have to really make sure that the personality is going to kind of create the guardrail.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I try to communicate that and structure it. Now, it doesn't mean just any person comes in. You want to make sure they're aligned from a personality perspective, but you are able to kind of expand it a little bit more. I heard this phrase, and it's not my phrase. I forgot where I got it from, but it's somebody else, somebody smarter than me. But what he said was when it comes to franchising, it is this model to drive profitability
Mhm.
for an average American with average intelligence, with an average work ethic. And I
Mhm.
really appreciated that. I really did. I was like, whoa, that's brilliant. Because it really sets the tone for the franchisor to the systems that they're creating so that you're like, wait, I need to create this for the average person because that expands your reach. But if
Mhm.
you're creating it for, this brilliant person who's brilliant at leadership and brilliant at all these other things, hey, you can, but you're going to have a limited pool that you're going to be pulling from.
No, that's awesome. And I think that's really, really, I feel like people need to rewind that a couple minutes and just play that back because that is just such a great summary of franchising where, you have these strengths, you have these weaknesses. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have families in your family or generations that literally ran businesses. You don't need to have previous experience running a business.
You
You
don't.
can literally, have no experience. I ran a dry cleaning franchise when I was in high school, just because, as you mentioned, you don't need to be brilliant at X, Y, or Z. You just
Well,
literally need to follow a system.
well, that's the expectations you're talking about. That's something else that we do. Um, because hey, like who's doing what and what are these different responsibilities? But what I tell franchisees are you're not getting an MBA by
Mm,
joining a franchise. I want to be very clear on that. You see it in our FDD. You see the hours and the different topics we train you on. But let's be honest, 6 hours of training on how to lead a younger generation is not going to turn you into the Simon Sinek of leadership for a younger generation.
yeah.
You may, franchisee, have to resource outside of the franchisor to gain, coming full circle, some
Mm,
of these skill sets.
mm,
Now, that may be with other franchisees. That could be maybe the franchisors providing peer group or mastermind groups, or maybe you got to go outside of the franchisor for different trainings. I've had plenty of franchisees who have been like, man, like understanding the finances of my business. I got some training from the franchisor, but I'm still unclear on a balance sheet and a statement of cash flow. And they go take other courses.
mm,
We require that every franchisee, if they don't have a financial background, has to go through, again, another plug, Profit Soup. It's a great online financial training platform. It's like $300, I think. I'm not sure
mm,
exactly what she's charging now, but it's very inexpensive. And it gives a franchisee a great introduction to understanding the finances of their business.
mm.
But again, even then, you're not a CFO by going through an online training.
Yeah.
So we're very clear to franchisees that it's their role within this is to run the business. We
Mm,
will train you primarily on, as the franchisor, it's the differentiators of the brand, our dog management approach. How do you execute our brand standards? I mean,
mm,
but the kind of peripheral parts of running a business, you get training, but hey, you may have to go get some of your own training.
mm.
But I don't want that to be a broken promise. I want that to be an expectation.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful. Just managing expectations is just so powerful when you are going through the process and asking questions, understanding all these different perspectives. And I think what's also interesting that you're bringing up is you can go through, a 6 month diligent training, but once you actually get into the store day one, you have that first issue, it's a whole nother ball game. And I think that's what's so fascinating where,
It's
you know,
so
you
hard.
you've been a franchise business coach where you have people like yourself that'll literally go into the store after you've opened to give you that hands-on experience. So I think it's just so powerful where, you don't need to be a strength in every different aspect.
Absolutely.
You'll have this alignment.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not even bring it full circle as we get towards the end. But it really does go to that owner operator
Mm,
semi-active absentee component. And I see this out there a lot. I do. And again, I'm not knocking anybody else, but I will see, hey, we're semi-active, we're absentee. And yeah, you can attract more people that way to your
mm,
brand. I get it. I do.
yeah.
But I sit here and the way I talk about your as a franchisee, your business is this is your kid.
Mm,
If you just had a kid, are you going to just hand that to a nanny for $15 an hour, $20 an hour, whatever you're paying your manager, and
mm,
then just be okay, go raise my kid? No, no parent. Well, if you are a parent and you're doing that, that's a separate topic.
yeah.
But as a parent, there's no way I would ever do that.
Yeah.
So we tell franchisee, our goal is not, we don't want you, unless you want to, franchisee, but our
Mm,
intention is not for you to be an owner operator forever.
right.
No, we want you to work on the business, not just always in the business. Some franchisees want to do that, no
Mm,
problem. But what we say is like you should really be in the store, living, breathing it, milking everything in there for the first
mm,
3 to even 6 months.
mm,
If this manager you hired quits and they knew everything and you don't, this is going to hurt not only the brand, but it's going to hurt your business.
mm,
So we really kind of guide franchisees in the first 3 to 6 months, learn the store in-store operations. I say you should be creating 1,000 raving fans. Every customer that
Mm,
comes in your business that first 3 to 6 months, shake their hands, kiss the babies, get the customer's phone numbers, text them, call them. Just focus on that. Learn everything about the business, and then
mm,
when you have that, start delegating that to a manager. Then start moving out of the inside the four walls and start moving into the community, but
mm.
learn the business. Mm.
Yeah, no, Rob, that was a really great summary. I know the hour has wrapped up and we haven't even spoken about the opportunity with Houndstown. Um, do you want to briefly dive into what
It won't be the
Houndstown
first
is?
time I pontificated a little bit about franchising.
No, trust
Yeah, so
Rob, I still have 100 other questions just based off the
let's
stuff you
schedule
said
another.
today.
I love talking to you. Let's schedule another time. I'd be happy to
Awesome.
keep on
No, let's do
pontificating.
another one Q2. Let's get it going. I had a great time. This is awesome. And I
Yeah.
guarantee the viewers will learn a lot today. This was action packed with a lot of information, all on franchising. Very, very helpful. I'm very excited.
Well, I like what you're doing, and there's kind of this niche here that is not. I don't think is as well articulated in franchising. Is how do you
Mm,
educate these prospects on the different kind of brands and what to look for and how to
mm,
evaluate brands. Yes, with the FDD, but through validation and peer review calls. So yeah, there's a lot to
yeah.
kind of talk about there. Hound Sound specifically. So we're a doggy daycare and boarding concept. We offer spa services. Our core competitive advantage for our brand is our dog management approach.
Mm,
The one of the founders, Mike Gould, was one of the founding members of the New York City Police Canine Unit, and his brain works in these magical ways, and he really sees how dogs see the world. He sees
mm,
it the same way. It's
yeah.
really amazing. So the entire brand is created from the dog's perspective. So our tagline is "We do it for the dogs." Whereas a lot, and again, without knocking anybody else that's out there, but they're generally looking at it from what does the human think dogs want?
Mm,
We're doing it really from what do dogs truly need and how they want it.
mm,
Specifically, what that looks like is we build our facilities from the dog's perspective. We build it from 18 inches off the ground. How do dogs see the world? And we build our facilities to how that creates a really cohesive environment for the dogs.
mm,
And there's a lot of different examples and how that's done inside the store. Then within our dog management approach, we allow and create a natural pack environment.
mm,
So we're training our franchisees and every team member in this incredibly robust, amazing training program. I know I'm biased, but I'm so proud of it. It's my team. It's not me. My team did a fantastic job on it,
mm,
and it's really kind of structured around dogs at their core genetically from the wild are wolves, and how would they form packs in the wild? And we, through our dog management approach, replicate that experience for dogs. And
mm.
dogs end up being safer. They get more exercise. They go home with what we call is the Hounds Town hangover. A customer of ours came up with that, and that's kind of our core business model. We're at 55 locations today. We'll be at probably over 70 by the end of this year, and probably
Mm,
close to 100 by the end of 2025. Strategically, what we're really focused on for us is that unit economics drives future locations opening.
mm,
So we really structure on driving revenue and profit. We share a lot of those details at approval day, but
mm,
that's really a kind of our core focus. We're not the way I talk about it to our franchisees is I'm not attached overtly to open locations. It's
mm,
important. It's a KPI. It's about how that brand is growing. But I tell our franchisees and I tell our team, if we get to 100 locations in 2 years, but we don't hit our unit economic goals, we
Mm,
messed up. We missed the ball.
mm.
But if we hit our unit goals, but the openings are below it, don't worry about it. We did well. Good job, everybody. Proud of you.
Yeah,
So it's really kind of driving, it's a saying in franchising, sales cures all ills. So if we're driving revenue, if we're driving profit, even with these macroeconomic factors of the SBA, if we're driving that, you're going to have happy franchisees, you're going to have a happier brand, and then we will
yeah.
ultimately achieve our 10-year target that every dog in America has access to a hounds town.
Let's go. I love it. And I think
Yeah.
that's really powerful. A lot of powerful things. But I think one of the things you mentioned in another podcast is letting operations drive sales. And, I love your perspective of rather than looking at just the number of stores that are physically opening, really paying attention to the unit validation and the unit economics. Because as you mentioned, if you have a strong franchise owner, a happy franchise owner, the other franchise owners will be awarded eventually. It's just, the timing will definitely come if you have the economics that stay up to date. So
Yeah, and it's managing the expectation. It's a business. Like
yeah,
any, this is not a hound sound thing. Here, and again, we do this at approval day. Here are the factors that are going to drive you getting to break even and cash flow positive. Your rent is going to be a big factor in that. How you run the business is going to be a big factor in it. Other
mm,
type of factors. It's all about managing those expectations as best you can. You can never be
yeah,
perfect at it, but really kind of driving it from there. And ultimately for us here, and we call it the journey to freedom,
mm,
it's really understanding the heart and the psychology behind the individual franchisee coming in. They do have a dream. It's very
yeah,
powerful. And they want to be free. They want to be free from corporate America. They want to leave a legacy. They want to create wealth for their families. And we consider it a sacred obligation to be supporting them on that journey. We get to be part of it. And that's really, really special. It's
mm.
nuanced. There's details to that, but really kind of leaning into the practicality, the systems, the form, the brand standards manual, critical,
Mm.
but never lose sight of the heart. You got to have both of those blended together. And
Mm.
that's a recipe for future success.
That's awesome. And even just with the podcast, not only in businessing and franchising, but in life, you mentioned Simon Sinek and he wrote the book Start With Why. And, everything starts with the why in business. It starts with that vision. Then you have someone like yourself that's actually able to physically integrate those systems. So I think that's really powerful in life. Anyone, if you're struggling, one of the things you started off with is, just trying different things, finding mentors, reading different things. You may not have it all figured out. Nobody really had it all
Nobody
figured out
does.
when they're
We
18,
don't.
20. Right, exactly. Everyone's still trying to figure it out. And even people that you look up to, they still look at themselves on like their second or third step and they're trying to figure it out. So, wherever you are in life, just understand, you're meant to be in that position. And, things happen for a reason. Things don't happen to you, but really for you so that you can really do things. So I think one of the things you also mentioned is, a few events really shaping your life and really falling into franchising. You never know when you're going to flip that corner, when that opportunity is going to show up. But I think a big lesson from your career is, just taking action, trying to learn and surrounding yourself with the right people. I think is just a powerful lesson for anyone struggling. If you put yourself out there, start to surround yourself with other people that are doing like-minded things, it's hard to still feel yourself struggling, just stack the daily wins as we kind of mentioned earlier. And I think you'll be good to go. So, Rob, I greatly appreciate your time today. I had a blast. We even went over the full 60 minutes. But
Totally
that's
okay.
awesome.
No, I really enjoyed it. I hope there was value. I mean, at the end of the day, I hope I will acknowledge I get passionate. And if it was a little not as tight, I hope the heart was at least behind it.
No, the goal is really unscripted conversations, which is really what we had today. Just diving into your experience, your thoughts, really the thoughts of Rob Flanagan, I think are really interesting. And I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers will learn a lot. And right before I get you off, Rob, I know outside of franchising, even more importantly, you are a 80s music connoisseur expert.
Huge, huge.
So
I
I have Spotify, a random 80s best hits. I'm gonna play a song and I'm gonna ask if you can guess the name of the song.
oh God, this is good. Good
We're,
stuff.
we're gonna see how the audio is. I'm just hopefully it's an appropriate song too. I have no idea what's gonna happen. Can you hear that?
I can't hear it.
Nothing.
No, I can't hear it.
Uh,
Take on Me by Aha.
you got it.
Hungry Like a Wolf by Duran Duran. Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News.
Your first guess was right without even hearing it.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, are
Oh.
you literally did not hear that?
Oh, I can't hear it. No.
You're a sidekick then. I think you're the dog whisperer.
I'm the 80s music whisperer. It's my wife like it's a weird skill set. Oh yeah, wow.
You can kind of see it with the camera.
Yeah, we'll have 80s music on in the car, and like a game we'll play is how quickly can I name the song, the
Yeah.
artist, and the year without looking at what it is on the dashboard.
Oh my God. Did you do your fair share of karaoke?
I have to have a couple cocktails in me.
Awesome.
I was not blessed with a singing voice in any capacity.
Awesome. Well, Rob, I greatly appreciate your time today. Episode 17 wrapped up. We'll have Rob back again in Q2. I appreciate your time, Rob. This is
Looking
awesome.
forward to it. Thanks so much.